투표 결과를 말씀드리겠습니다. 총 투표수 299표 중 가 234표, 부 56표, 기권 2표, 무효 7표로서 대통령 박근혜 탄핵 소추안은 가결되었음을 선포합니다.
그래서 크게 뜨고 감시하자.
큰 박수 부탁드립니다. 여기 있었던 구호 한번 외쳐볼게요. 다 같이 해볼까요? 내려오면 대박이다! 내려오면 대박이다! 버티면 쪽박이다!
박근혜는 끝장났다.
국회의원 선거는 금방 치를 수 있습니다, 우리가. 그렇죠? 우리 국민들 대단합니다, 정말. 네, 다음 자유 발언 이어가겠습니다. 한 박수 부탁드립니다.
아이고 사람이 많네. 지금
As the rebels increasingly lose their grip on Aleppo, Syrian armed forces continue to pound the besieged areas, many killed and wounded in the crossfire. We came to this frontline crossing just as a man was being evacuated, claiming he was shot by rebels as he tried to flee. They shot me as I was running out, he says. They don't allow anyone to get out. They said, "Are you going to the regime areas?" The opposition strongly denies its fighters would harm civilians, but the rebels do acknowledge they won't be able to hold out in Aleppo much longer. And that realization is leading to an avalanche of people trying to flee the rebel districts. Syrian troops throwing some bread, but not nearly enough to quell the hunger of the many who've been starving for months.
The Syrian military has made major advances once again in the past 24 hours, and we can see that as the army moves forward, more and more people are coming out of those former besieged areas.
Many of those fleeing families with small children, struggling to carry the few belongings they were able to take. Many overpowered by emotions, some with barely enough strength to walk, others too frail to walk at all. The Syrian army has amassed a massive force at this front line, the local commander with a clear message to the rebels. Look at this scene, he says. These are your families. Surrender yourselves and drop your arms. Come back to the country, and hopefully our leadership will forgive you. But for now, the fight goes on. This family, one of the many to cross into government-controlled territory, now in safety, but still in agony. Things used to be good, this elderly woman says. May God act out revenge on those who brought us these difficult circumstances, and may God protect us. And so they walk on, weak and traumatized, moving into an uncertain future.
توجه به که نهاد ریاست جمهوری خودش پا میذاره روی دم ما، من عرض میکنم رئیس جمهور برای مذاکراتی که با اجنبی انجام داده بود 41,000 صفحه سند ما تحویل قوه قضاییه دادیم و قوه قضاییه از من درخواست کرد این حرفو نزن. آقای رئیس جمهور افتضاح شکایت‌های تو دیگه در اومده. آقای رئیس جمهور دست از شکایت بازیش و بستن دهان‌ها و شکستن قلم‌ها نمیخواد برداره. من عباسی هم با اسناد و مدارکم و 2 قوه گردن کلفت این مملکت روبروی ما، 2 قوه، نهاد ریاست جمهوری و قوه قضاییه مملکت که پاسخ ندارن بدن، فقط شکایت، فقط بستن، فقط گرفتن. و تلاش آقای روحانی برای مادام و کندن ریاست جمهوری آقای هاشمی فراموش بشه. اینو بزنید توی دهن هر چی بیارن دموکراته. آقای رئیس جمهور مجتهد این مملکت هر روز به ما 49 فحش و تهمت رو زد ولی ما یک بار شکایت نکردیم. عزت نفس نیروهای انقلابی بود. آقایون تو بازی‌های سیاسی و در بی‌عرضگی‌های مطلقشون همه چیز رو باختن، حالا زبانشون با زبان رهبر مملکت یکی شده. چرا هر روز امثال عباسی و دیگران باید برن دادگاه با شکایت شخص رئیس جمهور، اما رئیس جمهور بی‌ادب که بلد نیست چطور حرف بزنه پشت پله بود 49 تهمت به مخالفین خودش میزنه، اون بلد آزاد بچرخه. آقای رئیس جمهور تو منو بکش دادگاه محاکمه کن، من تو رو در محضر مردم در دادگاه مردم یارو میکنم. تو همون فرده، همون رئیس جمهور عصبانی بی‌ادبی هستی که 49 نسبت بعد به مخالفین خودش گفتی نفر، گفتی بی‌سواد، گفتی به جهنم برگشته، گفتی بی‌عقل. اگر یه دونه از اینا رو کسی دیگه به تو گفته بود آموزی ناریجانی میکشیدش تو دادگاه باش برخورد میکرد. رئیس جمهوری رو ببینید که ادب نداره که از دولتش بالاتر باشه.
The Russian government has engaged in espionage against Americans.
Long before the US allegations of meddling in the election, Russian and Russian-speaking hackers were known to be some of the most sophisticated in the world.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails.
Now, in the post-election US, fears of Russian cyber interference still linger. But one New York company is trying to turn the tables to take advantage of that Russian skill set to actually protect American companies. CyberSec is the work of New York-based lawyer Arkady Bukh, who has defended some of the world's most notorious Russian cybercriminals, bad actors of the hacking world, some of whom he is now working with.
Our company include specifically hackers who've been prosecuted, who some of them still wanted. We do consult with the criminals who explain how the hacks usually done, from the botnets to creation of the viruses to actual attacks.
In Moscow, I met one of those consultants, Sergei Pavlovich, a prolific credit card hacker back in the 90s. He has already served 10 years in prison in his home country of Belarus.
I explained him what to do to steal money from someone's bank account.
Pavlovich is still wanted in the US in connection with a major credit card fraud ring. That hasn't stopped him publishing a book called How I Stole $1 Million.
Did you really steal $1 million?
Yes, 1 million and little more.
And then there's Vladislav Horohorin, known online as Bad B, currently in prison in the US for selling millions of stolen credit card numbers through online forums. He told me via email that former hackers have a, quote, mindset which allows them to anticipate all the possible attack vectors. Hacking is not a skill, he writes, it's an art. Russian hacking has been in the news a lot recently, particularly around the US election. How has that impacted your business?
We get more inquiries.
So far, Buch's clients have mainly been small and medium-sized businesses.
Some banks been inquiring, but the main problem is the issue of liability of criminals consulting and assisting.
He's willing to take the risk, he says, because the dangers in cyberspace are growing, and these people may be some of the best qualified to stop them.
Dazed and terrified, a young girl flees her neighborhood, now a war zone in eastern Mosul. Soldiers from Iraqi special forces try to console her as the battle rages nearby. The offensive to retake the city is almost into its third month, but progress has been slow, as this rare footage obtained by CNN shows. ISIS is fighting back with the usual means: snipers, suicide bombers, and booby traps, while hundreds of thousands of civilians are caught in the middle, trying to survive one day at a time. A woman was killed by shelling here, says this man. Another woman was wounded. We just need this random shelling to stop, and then we can get on with our lives. Prior to the offensive, Iraqi officials advised Mosul residents to stay home if they felt safe. Those who stayed behind, like this bearded young man, are able to provide Iraqi forces with real-time intelligence on the enemy, just a few buildings away, as he explains.
Kill one from Daesh. Now the situation is very good.
The battle for this city is now a street-by-street slog. Troops must clear every building, and they never know if what awaits them is an ambush, an IED, or an anxious family huddled inside. So far, Iraqi forces have managed to drive ISIS out of around 30% of this sprawling city. Residents have come out to greet the troops. This young man has a poem ready, extolling the army and cursing life under ISIS. Because there was no electricity, no fuel, no medicine, he says. He finishes his poem with a kiss. While almost everyone is quick to curse ISIS, or Daesh as they call it here, bicycle repairman Yasser has a nuanced view. 50% of the people in Mosul don't have a problem with ISIS. Only recently it's been hard to make a living. Life was normal, but they imposed on us how to shave and how to dress. If you conformed, it was fine, but if you didn't, they whipped you. Among the houses in one East Mosul neighborhood, Iraqi troops found a training center for fighters, the walls full of diagrams of various weapons. It's like a school for new recruits, says this officer. Most were boys between the ages of 12 and 14. With clothing to match what many Iraqis insist is an alien ideology.
The same uniform in Kandahar in Afghanistan.
For now, the authorities are struggling to provide the basics. This healthcare center is now up and running, but it's not enough.
We have many patients with renal failure, chronic disease, leukemia. We have no hospital for treatment of such cases.
On the edge of the city, relief workers hand out water, food, blankets, and clothing. Volunteer Man Ajej is also trying to repair the damage to the country's soul.
I am from Mosul, I am Christian, but I decided to help my friend, my brothers from Mosul after Daesh leave it.
The process of healing, of reconstruction, could take a very long time, but there is hope. Ben Wiedemann, CNN.
This is what rebel desperation looks like during the Aleppo nights, firing at jets in the skies, unable to stop them from dropping their deadly load. And this is what the rebels' defeat looks like when daylight comes. Thousands of civilians fleeing the old town of Aleppo only hours after government forces took most of it back. Among them, Najua, with her 7 children, one of them her baby, Bilal. When we left, there was a lot of shelling behind us, a lot of shooting in front of us, and the airplanes above us, she says. We barely managed to get out. Most seem weak and malnourished, some resting, finally in safety, in this former school. The smallest, a baby girl, Ghazal, is only 7 days old, born right as the battles were at their worst.
It's really remarkable, some of the scenes that we're witnessing here. Hundreds of people have already come across the border crossing between eastern and western Aleppo, and many of them are taking shelter in buildings like this one, carrying only the very few possessions they could take as they fled.
Soldiers take us to the places they recaptured from opposition forces only hours before. We see Syrian troops evacuating weak and elderly, and rebel barricades showing just how intense the fighting was.
Just look at all the destruction here. We're actually in the old town of Aleppo right now, and this entire area until a few days ago was right on the front line.
While this may not be the end of the opposition's fight in Aleppo, many of those fleeing describe the rebels' morale sinking and the harrowing conditions in the besieged areas. We didn't have food and barely any bread, this man says. We were 8 people. They would only give us 2 loaves of bread every 2 days. That was it for all of us. While much of eastern Aleppo has been reduced to rubble, the one thing expanding was the cemeteries. This one ran out of space as the bodies kept coming. Now that much of eastern Aleppo has changed hands, Syrian soldiers plant their flag on the ruins of the place they've just conquered.
روایت خودش را دارد. اسد و متحدانش در حلب از فتح و پیروزی میگویند، اما اینجا رسانه‌های ترکیه از فجایع انسانی در آن شهر می‌نویسند، البته آمیخته با حسی ناامید کننده، مثل این تیتر روزنامه قرار که می‌نویسد الوداع حلب، و یا تیتر درشت روزنامه ارطغرل که از ویران شدن حلب نوشته، یا این یکی که از اتفاق و سقوط حلب می‌نویسد. این یکی یعنی شفق، حلب می‌میرد، و تیتر درشت روزنامه استار، آخرین فریاد حلب، و دیگری و دیگری. کم نیستن این تیترهای درشت که با توضیحات ریزشان بدون استثنا اسد و ایران را ویرانگران حلب و سوریه معرفی می‌کنند. بعید می‌دانم چهره ایران در طی چند سده گذشته تا این حد در میان افکار عمومی منطقه تخریب شده باشد. تمامی این تیترها حاملان آرام یک طرز تلقی در میان مردمان منطقه است و آن اینکه سوریه را ایران ویران کرد. پرسش بزرگ اما اینجا باقی می‌ماند. دستاورد این ذهنیت منفی برای آینده ایران چه خواهد بود؟ البته که پرسش بزرگ و ترسناکی است. و این سو در استانبول اعضای یک انجمن دوستانه در حمایت از حلب اینگونه کفن پوشان با چسبی بر دهان و عروسک‌های خونین تجمعی نمادین به راه انداختند. کمی آن طرفتر نومان کرتلموش معاون نخست وزیر در کمپینی تحت عنوان انسانیت در حلب نمی‌میرد شرکت کرده. این کمپین توسط سازمان دیانت ترکیه به راه افتاده. کرتلموش البته جدای از آن که میگوید ما تا زنده ایم حلب هم زنده است، اما حرفهای مهمتری هم میزند. او میگوید آنچه در سوریه میگذرد در امتداد قرارداد ساکس-پیکو است، قراردادی که در خلال جنگ جهانی اول و در جریان توافق کشورهای اروپایی و روسیه شکل گرفت و نقشه کنونی خاورمیانه را ترسیم کرد. و در اینجا در شهر ماردین ترکیه یک کمپین به راه افتاده و جوانان عروسک‌های دستساز کودکان سوری که در چادر شهرها زندگی می‌کنند را به دست گرفتند و در کنار جاده می‌فروشند. همزمان خبرگزاری دولتی ترکیه می‌گوید نیمی از آوارگان سوری مقیم ترکیه را کودکان تشکیل می‌دهند. باری کار روزنامه‌نگار تنها بازتاب رویداد است که اگر توان دخل و تصرفی در وقوع رویداد داشتیم شاید این گونه به تماشای ماتم کودکان نمی نشستیم.
All your armies, all your fighters, all your tanks, and all your soldiers against the boy holding a stone, standing there all alone. In his eyes, I see the sun. In his smile, I see the moon. And I wonder, I only wonder, who is weak and who is strong?